Good afternoon. So the theme is Beyond Borders, but we are creating some borders as there's many people who are sitting on the last seats of each row, which means that if those who come a little bit later want to get in, they're climbing over or trying not to disrupt those borders. So I'm going to ask that if you have empty seats that you move closer towards the center so that we can welcome those who might be coming in late and can find a seat easily. I want to acknowledge the land that we're on, the Lenape people, the ancestors, past, present, and future, and for all of the stories and the histories that is in this space that we are going to be able to continue adding on to. Also, this is a space that belonged to many, as it was a space of gathering, it was a place of trade, and it was a place where many, many different tribes and communities came together to speak, leaving their weapons off the island. And I think that ties in very beautifully with our theme here today. My name is Heena Patel, and I have the pleasure of moderating a wonderful conversation with these exceptional people here today. The approach that we're going to be taking today is an indigenous feminist approach to this panel that is spoken about by Eve Tuck. So what we're going to be doing is this. We're going to start with a dialogue with our esteemed panelists here. And then after that, we're going to pause and I'm going to have you guys discuss with each other for a few minutes. What are your responses? What questions are coming up? In that time, I want you to share questions that you might have with those next to you. And you're going to peer review your questions. Because when we get to the Q&A, I ask that follow a couple of guidelines. One, there is incredible wealth of knowledge and experience in this room, and I know many of you could be up here as well. But I ask that you not take the moment at the mic to share why you should be up here, but rather that you ask a question. And I ask that you think about whether that question does in fact need to be asked in front of everyone, whether that question is going to advance the conversation and provide value to our peers in this room. If it is a question that you feel that can be asked privately, these people, they're going to be with us over the next 3 days and would be happy to speak with you afterwards. So just keep that in mind, that we're going to be asking questions that advance the conversation, and that, yes, you can provide some context for your question, but it is not a place to tell us why you should be up here. We'd be happy to invite you to be up here in the future. Yes? All right. Not at all my thing. Eve Tuck is the one who speaks of this idea that we're going to experiment with here. So our theme is Beyond Borders. Now, you can read about the official bios of all of these speakers, which I'm not going to do. You can do that on your own time. But in fact, the way we're going to start is I want you to share your name, some of the roles that you might be playing in this field, and then how your work goes beyond borders. So, Limor, why don't we start with you?
Good afternoon. My name is Limor, and I'm incredibly honored to be here with Heena and these extraordinary people and with all of you. I work in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I am the general manager for the live arts. And so I'm a little bit of a sort of working behind, I don't want to say enemy lines, but definitely outside of the performing arts field. And my world is object-based, commodity-based, and I'm bringing artwork that is actually experience-based, or what the artists that I work with make results in memories, not an object that can be bought or sold or put on somebody's taxes or taken off their taxes or bequeathed. So the values that I bring are not completely aligned with the values of the institution that I work within, and therefore my crossing boundaries or
borders, yes?
Borders is to try to expand the notion of works of art to include performance.
Thank you. Plot?
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And my name is Colette Mhako. I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm a creative director for an institution called JIBILIKA Dance Trust, also Kwenda Productions, which is a production company that promotes and develops performances. And I'm also a journalist, so I've sort of different backgrounds connected together. Journalism was my initial background. With regard to breaking barriers, I think there are so many barriers that we've had to break. Being here, I've heard the issue of funding. In my country, it doesn't really exist. There's no state funding towards the arts, so the government does not support the arts in any way. The only funding that is available is coming from NGOs and embassies, and at most it's towards development agendas. There are no venues to operate from. The few venues that are available are closing down because of non-viability issues, because of an economic situation that is difficult to contain. We are grappling with a 15% HIV rate, and the youth population constitutes the majority of the population, about 60%, and they're the most affected. But looking at all those things, I saw an opportunity to break barriers in terms of breaking communication barriers, reaching out to the youth population using youth culture, different performance arts and tools to amplify their voices, to give them space to perform and engage. And the lack of venues sort of prompted us to innovate around available spaces to be able to reach out to families in their homes, in their communities, than confining ourselves to venues. And the non-availability of funding also pushed us to break the financial borders and look at collaborative effort and the youth energy that we could use to amplify and sort of drive our initiatives. So our initiatives are driven by the youth energy because we believe that youth energy there's a lot of it, and also that there are so many possibilities given the narratives that we have out of the struggles that we have.
Beautiful, thank you. Osa.
Well, I'm the artistic director of the Sámi theater. My name on the passport is Osa Maria Gabriella Simha, and I happen to have a Swedish passport because I was registered within the border of Sweden. I have a Sámi name, and that goes like this. We give our children song names.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And this is the name my grandfather gave me. I have composed many Sámi traditional songs, but according to our tradition, I can only claim copyright cash for this song that my grandfather gave me. That's the only one I own. The songs that I have made for other and for animals or mountains or places, that belongs to them, not to me.
Wow.
I started quite young. I was growing up in the 70s, and our traditional singing was forbidden. I was picked up by some Sámi traditional singers, and I was taken on a tour the entire summer just to revive our traditional singing. And it took us about 7-8 years, and our people stepped ahead and started to practice the Sámi traditional singing again. My grandfather, who gave me the song name, I saw him being held in holding cells 24 hours once in a while because of singing the Sámi traditional songs. So this has been a lot of my motor in working with the arts. It's to change the rules that have been put on my people and in us practicing our traditional practices, because our practices are the things that have helped us survive colonialism and also to survive the harsh climate up in the Arctic where my people reside.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, we speak about borders, and Limor, I know in one of the conversations we had, you spoke a lot about how your work goes beyond the borders or ideas of what collaboration looks like. That you are sitting within a museum. At the same time, the larger spaces that you're situated within the performing arts space, and there are preconceived notions of what performance looks like, of what collaboration looks like, and so much of your work is about blurring the spaces between using arts as really a vehicle for social change and social justice. And I'd love for you to speak a little bit about that work and what the ideas around collaboration were and how that shifted over your work, and particularly with regards to the project with the San Joaquin State Prison, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so the Metropolitan Museum of Art is sort of, it's so big that it creates its own kind of weather patterns. And it has resonance and kind of just heft. And so by inference, because I work within that institution, I have to be extremely mindful and carry the notion of the impact of making work at the Metropolitan Museum very heavily. And so it's a huge opportunity and it's a big responsibility. And so my team and I have been sort of harnessing our resources, and that's not necessarily financial resources because we are a shockingly small organization within the Met, but just the resources of being within this place that is so full of human achievement and ideas, to try to, as much as we can, connect with people who are not as connected or underserved or in some ways are not, whose voices are not being heard. And I can talk a lot more about working within a museum doing this work, but to Heena's question, we recently reached out to San Quentin State Prison in the Bay Area, just outside of San Francisco, where, as in many other places in the US, many musicians are incarcerated. And we asked them if they would be interested or willing to collaborate on a work choreography that would then be presented at the Met. And it was unlike any collaboration I've ever done because we're speaking completely different languages, and we needed to learn how to operate within this context of working with a group of collaborating musicians that we can't see, that it's hard to talk to, that have concerns that we've never faced before or questions. So we flew out there with Silas Farley, who's a choreographer and a dancer with New York City Ballet, and there was a lot of trust and sort of what I call fascia building, sort of connective tissue building that had to happen before anything could move forward. Because there's a lot of ways to engage with kind of social issues and a lot of ways to sort of enter this space. And we were kind of, Silas was entering this space from the point of view of, I'm an artist, I'm an individual artist, you're an artist, I would like to collaborate with you and make a piece. This was not about social justice per se. It wasn't about, raising awareness. It was literally artist to artist, artists working together as much as possible to make a new work of art. And so through, obviously because technology helps, we were able to commission 12 new pieces of music by people who were incarcerated, men who were incarcerated, and those pieces of music were then choreographed by Silas and performed at the Met in the galleries, and it was given free with museum admission, so there was no ticketing, there was no kind of, oh, I have to self-select as someone who goes to ballet, and which is one of the, it's a longer discussion, but one of the power of working in a museum is that the threshold to entry is completely different than the threshold to entry to a venue like this, where you have to know that it exists, know where to buy your tickets, buy the tickets, show up at 8 o'clock, you know, worry about what you're going to wear. None of that happens in a museum context. People come with their families, they come at 10 o'clock in the morning, they come whenever, and that's when we did the performance. All day, during the day, when people are there with their families. And so it was a very difficult and extraordinarily rewarding project, which then, obviously, because I think more or less because it's the Met, had a lot of repercussions in the funding world, in the foundation world, in the dance world, in the sort of social justice, incarceration, justice worlds that are now still sort of vibrating through the Met and through this project.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that it started really with art.
Yeah.
And the impact came, but it really was about the art and using the privilege that you have in this space and being able, and also thinking outside of the box to go, we're going to make this happen, and I have resources to be able to facilitate this work. Now, Pat, you are in a space that can be very resource scarce in a traditional manner, but what you've done is so fascinating that you've been marrying the worlds of pop culture,
Yes.
digital technology, and really embracing it. And you know, you said HIV is a huge issue in communities, and I'd love for you to speak a little bit about the intersection between art, digital media, popular culture, and how you've been bringing that all together to advance education around health, especially amongst young populations.
All right, thank you so much. One thing that we realized in all the previous campaigns that are being done with regard to, say, HIV was that young people were not really interested in the topic. And it came with so many cliches. So there was sort of a disconnect, and much of the programming was being done by adults. So young people were not really fascinated about it. So we thought, okay, what could be the barrier? So the barrier was mainly to do with the language, how the message was being communicated, because they were using a lot of medical terms, a lot of data that could not really be grasped by a youngster. So we thought, why don't we use art forms that appeal to these young people, but at the same time send a positive message? So we commissioned a project. It's quite interesting because I visited a prison in St. Louis in 2012. And there was a rehabilitation program that they were doing with the juvenile offenders in the prison. They were using poetry, theater, and so forth. So when I went back to Zimbabwe after that visit, I then decided, oh, look, but our struggle is not really crime. It's actually HIV. Why not use the art forms that we have to actually deal with that? So we did a pilot at one of our festivals, and the pilot was quite successful because people came paying for an event that was themed with HIV programming. And this sort of caught the attention of one of the funders. It was PEPFAR, the US President's Fund for HIV. And they said, oh, we like what you guys have done. You've actually managed to engage with young people. Why don't you do it as a full-length program? So we've been running that program for the past 6 years. We've won awards with it. We've gone into communities, changed lives. But we said our program will not be successful if we are not able to track the impact that we are making. How do we measure that impact? How effective is the message that is getting into the communities? So we had to find our stories of change in terms of not just the development agenda, but also in terms of the creative process. So from the group of young people that we were working with, that were performing, they were coming from these communities, performing for their own communities, disseminating an important message. We managed to create stars, national stars that are performing on different platforms, that are getting paid, that are living off their creative talents, that are flying from one country to the other, performing at festivals and other platforms. But also at the same time, whenever we did performances, we would say, invite an HIV counseling and testing institution to come and just be just on the site. After the performances, we would ask them how many people just came for testing. And we used that as a tracking point to say, if we had 1,000 people attending our event, if 300 people got tested, and then on the next event, and ultimately after a 12-month period, how many people were getting tested? Were our numbers increasing? Does that indicate a response to our messages and our programming? And there was an affirmation, yes. So that's what we managed to do with regard to the HIV. And we use the same model now for other issues, drug abuse, violence, and also just empowering the youth. But also, the social media aspect.
Yes.
In Zimbabwe, we have one TV station, one state-owned TV station, which sends out a lot of propaganda. And young people are not interested in the TV station. And internet is quite expensive. So young people have a limitation in terms of getting access to information. And we had to devise ways around the digital platforms so as to be able to avail that information to young people. Screening films in communities, free screenings. Would just talk to the right owners for different films, screen them, and also use WhatsApp, because in Zimbabwe there are bundles for WhatsApp, so you can easily distribute information. But having that information, making it credible and valued enough for young people to appreciate and understand it, there was need for a continuous involvement of the creative process so that it's not just abstain, get tested, no, but to really be creative and innovative about it so that ultimately, subconsciously, the young people were able to grasp the important information, but in the form of entertainment.
Amazing. I'm going to add something that you had shared earlier before we come to you, Osa, that he speaks about there being one TV station and it being very government-controlled and propaganda, but the young people speak a totally different language, aka slang. So they've been able to get songs written that are in the slang, and it goes by the censors because they have no idea what the song is about. Kind of cool side fact that he had shared. And Osas, so much of your work is about advancing the indigenous voice, centering indigenous experiences in a country and space where there's a huge lack of awareness and even a recognition of the humanity and the histories of the original inhabitants of the land. And I'd love for you to speak a little bit about why you decided that you needed to use art and language to advance work that the political system was just not doing anything about, and then what you decided to do.
Yeah. Well, part of what I feel my call at this age is to rebuild my people's society with arts. And when I started to work at the Sámi Theater, this is now 5 years ago, the theater had been run for 15 years by non-Sámi people. So finally, I came and I got the job, and I started to involve the Sámi Arts Society. And I talked to one Sámi theater director and said, what are we going to do? What play are we going to put up? So we started to discuss the political situation among the Sámi people. Remember, we are divided into 4 countries: Norway, Sweden, Finland, and northwestern Russia. And the Sámi politicians within the 3 Nordic countries, they have been talking long time about the truth and reconciliation process. And me and the Sámi director, we said, well, this is going to take 20 years if the politicians are going to do it. So why don't we do it ourselves? And we knew that Canada had just finished their reconciliation process, truth and reconciliation. So there was a lot of methods that we could study, and we met a lot of native people from Canada who had been in the process themselves. So we chose to go and live into 5 different Sámi communities in the 3 countries of Norway, Sweden, and Finland, and stay for a while. And we had picked societies where we know they have a lot of problems. One society we stayed has the problem because for 100 years ago, the Swedish government started to relocate Sámi people from my area to other areas, to other tribal areas with other languages, other traditions. And this has caused a lot of turbulence when the relocated Sámis came with other traditions. And those problems are not solved yet today after 100 years. And another society in Norway, which became actually a medial scandal a couple of years ago, where priests of the Christian communities were sexually abusing Sámi children. So we moved in as a theater group with writers, with psychologists, with spiritual healers that carry our spiritual knowledge, and stayed in the communities. And we talked to the entire society, sometimes 50 people. We picked out people that we felt we want to talk to more privately. And we wrote a script from all those testimonies these people told us. We didn't change anything. Every word that is used in the play has come from a Sámi mouth. And we also had this a little bit, how do we treat the people? How is it going to be for them to hear their stories? This project was in the genre of documentary theater. And the audience that came afterwards, the people that had left their testimonies, of course it was very moving for them to hear their own private story being told on stage from another mouth than themselves. It created a little bit of distance to their own story. But it was a very heavy process, and one of the processes that has meant very much to me artistically, but also very draining. After coming from these societies, it took me about 10 days to become myself again, because there was so much emotion and so many stories. And nevertheless, even if the Sámi people, we are living on a huge area, like half of Norway, half of Sweden, the northern parts of Finland, it's a huge area. The stories were similar. And now when I meet my indigenous brothers and sisters from all over the world, even their stories are similar.
So even in the trauma, you've though found a way to find collective support and sharing, and just elevating those stories provides a mode of starting to do the healing that the political system's not at all providing for, it sounds like.
But mainly also for the Sámi people to understand that the practice of theater, the practice of art, it's a open room, it's a free space. Whatever I tell, I will be respected. It's a room where you can have a little bit of breath, where you can get the distance to your rotten reality and maybe be healed somehow and get the strength to go on.
Beautiful. So if you haven't gotten a sense of it, these people have incredible stories, and we can keep talking. But as I said, what we're going to do now, we're going to pause for a few minutes. And I want you to turn to the people next to you on your left and right and share if you have thoughts or reflections on what we've been talking about or questions. Speak to your neighbors. If you have a question that you want to ask, tell your neighbor first and see if your neighbor thinks it's a good question. Yeah? So we're going to, a couple of minutes, meet your neighbors, say hello, and let's talk about some of the ideas that have been surfaced here so far. All right, just take a second to wrap up your conversation. Finish your thought of whoever is speaking, and we'll come back. You just started. You can keep talking afterwards. All right. All right, I'm just going to ask everyone to come back. Are your minds buzzing with thoughts and ideas now? Yes, hopefully. Wonderful. So we're going to open it up to questions. Now, we have 2 microphones here, and there are going to be 2 roving microphones. Again, if your anecdote connects to your question, by all means, share it, but keep it short. 2, did you ask the person next to you if your question should be asked? If you did not, then perhaps take a moment to answer that question for yourself. 3, in general, does the question need to be posed in front of everyone so that the answer is something that will add value for all? Or is it something that should be asked one-on-one? Those are the things that I ask you to keep in mind. And I see you, but I am a proud ISPA fellow, who's just finished my fellowship last year, but I want to start with a fellow's question. I don't know if you are one. If you are, you're welcome to be the first.
I'm not. I will step aside.
Okay, you'll be the second one. I'm going to invite a fellow to come up and ask a question. Oh, well, the way I see it, the fellowship was created to bring in different voices and ideas, right? So we're going to try to center one of those voices for a moment. I will utilize my privilege to elevate one of those voices. How about that? Do we have a fellow that has a question? Yes, right there. Okay. And please do tell us your name.
Hi, I'm Shoaib, and I'm from Lahore, Pakistan, and this is my first year with the ISPA Fellowship. So I was, when Plot and Essa spoke about the struggle that they have to put in terms of producing and making the work possible. So I see that this is one self which operates to deal with all the challenges. And the second self is creative, which also produces, which also makes music and writes poetry. So how you deal with that kind of a I don't want to call it a duality, but having a dual self, which has to be very realistic also, but you also have to have enough dreams that you are able to produce as a creative person. So what is the balance, and that makes us an important creative piece as well, but then you are also able to make resources to produce it.
Oh, sir?
Yes. Since I started up as a traditional Sámi singer and seeing the oppression that our traditional songs were under and being part of the movement of bringing it back, and after that becoming a theater artist, but still being a traditional singer. As an artist, I also write plays, I've been writing film scripts. I see that inspiration is something that I need as a fuel to be able to do the artistic work. And for me, inspiration is something that is very sacred. And the day I run out of inspiration, I have no more stories to tell. So I think this way of seeing our traditional singing and not letting it come to the commercial world where I just start to gather in a bunch of royalties and buy me a Mercedes-Benz or whatever, it keeps me on the level that I can say that my traditional values are sacred. This is me. And I know a lot of Sámi artists practice this. I know there's many that don't. But I feel it very much that it's my mission to remind about how our singing survived the oppression.
Your question?
Here to ask the question, because if I didn't, I would probably not have stood up to ask it at all. And my neighbor encouraged me to do so. Heena, you were very good today about setting a frame of how to act and behave, and this maybe made me think of how sometimes in education, I have a young child, and there is this concept of providing a frame for the child, right? You can let them do, create, be, but you provide a cadre, a frame, which gives them, among other things, the opportunity to develop a certain individuality and to feel safe also. And this made me think about this idea of breaking borders, and what does that mean? I mean, on one hand, I'm thinking, okay, if we break borders, does that mean that we cancel ourselves as identities, as indigenous groups, as particular identities throughout the world? And is that the right term? Do we want to break borders, or do we want to reframe borders? Because in a way, you want to resurface, you want to put in evidence your Sámi culture, and that to me somehow is not necessarily breaking borders, but bringing up a new frame. Can we think of borders, or can we think of frames in a positive perspective?
Well, I know you do a lot of reframing, especially in your work with youth. Perhaps you can share some thoughts.
In my perspective, I think borders are more to do with limitations or with barricades that limit us from interacting with another group of people based on perceived differences. Differences even from the creative side, where non-professional and professional artists are not really interacting at the same level. And pretty much from my experience, most of the initiatives that we've done are premised on the idea of wanting to create interaction and sort of an exchange and working together at an eye level. Because, for example, in Zimbabwe, there are not professional schools of arts. So you'd find there's maybe one dance school, which is only for the privileged, those that have money, those that have more resources, or possibly connected enough to actually access. So you'd find with a population that is grappling with 90 to 95% unemployment, there are a lot of divisions that you find in their society. But how do you break down these divisions? What we did is that we engaged professional trainers to actually engage with these communities and train young people. And out of those young people that were trained, some of them managed to get into professional training and be able to break their financial borders, able to break the borders that limit their voices because they are not being heard. They cannot speak. There are few media outlets. So I think in my context, in my own opinion, borders are more to do with mental rather than physical barricades.
Do you want to guys?
A limit or a barrier towards education, right? In a way,
Yes.
in your case. Great, thank you.
Thank
We
you
have a
so much.
question back there.
Hello, I will try to make my question as relevant as possible. I'm Koen Maas, manager of Brussels Jazz Orchestra, but since this year, I was also asked to collaborate in the Conservatory of Antwerp, which is a conservatory of music, jazz, classical music, dance, and theater. And we restarted there a new program, which is called Artists in Society for third bachelor students. And the goal of the program is to make students aware of the position artists can have and have in society. So my question goes a little bit further on the comment of 2 minutes ago. I think for a traditional organization as conservatories can be, that it is a quite out-of-the-box program. And my question to the panel is, what is the panel's idea what young people should be taught during their formation as professional artists in an art education setting to raise their consciousness of the power they can have as an artist?
Who wants to take that?
Ooh, this well, yes. I mean, myself, when I'm recruiting young Sámi people to my theater, we have within my people 9 different languages. So I'm in big need of actors that speak one or two of these languages. And I have had to have a debate with myself. What kind of education should the Sámi performing artist have? Should I send them to the National Theatre School, Dance School in Sweden, Norway, Finland? Or should we create a school that is based on our values, on art, environment, first of all, because we have very strong traditions about how we deal with Mother Earth. Could the traditions of the Western world be combined with our traditions? And how do we do this? And the closest, I'm still thinking about it, so I don't have an answer, but the closest I have come in my speculation is the fact that how did we teach our traditional artistic traditions among our people? And it's been that way that usually when I started to sing the traditional singing, I had to find my own master. And the master had to be outside my family. It couldn't be my mother or somebody very close to me. So my master had to be somebody that wasn't too cute to me. So in my way of thinking that at the moment, I might change in a few years, but I think learning by doing is the best way. And having a mentorship, having a master who is working tightly with you, I think that's something that would work for my people according to the traditions we have.
Limor, what do you see? I mean, the question was really about arts and education, but as someone coming from a presenting organization in a space that is supposed to be about culture and history and learning, what do you see? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I actually, thank you for your question. I work a lot with art conservatories here in New York, Juilliard, Manhattan School of Music, Manus, and others around. And what I would say that perhaps could be bolstered or strengthened in conservatory training is really two things. One is the students need to understand that they have to have ideas. They really do. And of course, we live in a world where they're really recreative artists. You know, they're learning, you know, they're memorizing, you know, Charlie Parker solos, unfortunately, these days, or they're learning how to play Chopin etudes. And that's great, but that track is sort of going to extinction, more or less. So they need to build a new track for themselves, and they must have ideas, even if they are recreating existing works of art. Because without ideas, they are just not interesting. And then the second thing is that we need them more than they need us. We need them to be entrepreneurial and to come to us, the big presenting organizations, and say, you know what, we're going to completely reconsider George Friedrich Handel's entire career, because every way we have been looking at his body of work and his world has been completely missing huge parts of the history, and we need to revise that history. And you know, I can do it, but I think that I need them to do it. And so museums, especially historical museums, are incredibly important tools and training grounds, because they hold a lot of stuff, but more importantly, they hold a lot of ideas, and they hold a history that needs to be retold. And you know, we're trying to do that at the Met very actively to sort of decolonize the narratives, but we need those students to understand that they are absolutely essential and their ideas are essential to the progress.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Did I scare you all so much? And now people are like, ooh, I don't know if I should ask this question. All right, great. Jackie.
Sorry, I have a question here.
Oh,
I
sorry,
can
I didn't
wait.
see you back there. My
But I
apologies.
think it's nice if I can connect to this story. Hello, my name is Cecilia Tins. I'm from the Netherlands. And I'm an artistic director of a company that creates staged concerts for young audiences. Our heritage is the European classical music. And in this moment of history, I find myself responsible to open up that repertoire. So I call it global classical music. So I'm searching for example, I don't know if in the Sámi culture there is a sort of a classical music from a tradition I can imagine, because you were singing right now. My search is how can I approach my responsibility to program more diverse, as well as in the choices of repertoire, as in the engagement of the musicians and stage directors. And the question I wanted to ask you, Asa, if you ground an academy for the Sámi repertoire, could I, as a Dutch European girl or woman, audition for your academy to learn your art form, or is it connected to being an indigenous woman, which I am not?
I have been asked this question many times, similar questions, and I'm very proud that you are so interested about our traditions that you would like to work with it. I used to say I have 3 demands. This is how you apply to my teachings. Learn the Sámi language, learn the history, learn the traditions, and learn the religion, and I will teach you our singing. Welcome.
Hi, Jackie Davis, and thank you all of you for your stories and for thinking outside the box and being change agents. My question's for Limor. I found myself wondering, what was the impetus for you to reach out to a prison to create the work? And then I'm really interested in the impact. Was there an impact for these people who wrote their songs? And could you talk a little bit about that for us?
So the impetus is just this responsibility to use this platform that I've been given, that I have, to raise awareness, to change consciousness, to give voice to those people who don't have a voice, and to share some of the resources that are concentrated in this one zip code of Manhattan. So we're very active. We're actively doing that every. It wasn't an isolated case. We're continuing this in everything that we do. Most of the projects have an angle where it touches on ways to give voice and resources to those who don't have them or don't have enough of them. And so the impact is very complicated and interesting. We made the decision to not make those tracks available. We made the decision that we're custodians of this music, but that it doesn't belong to us, so therefore we can't give it away. So the music actually was only heard in the live performance, and the video is available only, if you ask me for it, but it's not widely available. There's a little snippet, I think, online, or there's a lot of Instagram, but and so the impact is complicated, but I can tell you that some other part of the impact is, the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation was all over this thing, and they had never considered performance as a lever for social change. And so I think that's going to change the way foundations and institutions are going to think about ways to affect change. We're all, like-minded organizations trying to do something, and, performance is not the first thing that comes to mind. So, you know, there's the law, there is Congress, there is, you know, mental health, and there is performance, and we have to harness all of it. And that's where I'm seeing most of the impact. The impact on the men came, there was one moment where actually several of the men who created these, we call them we commissioned new spirituals, basically. So two of the men had actually been released since, I mean, it took many years to make this project, and they were able to be with us at the Met as the composers, and that was just, I can't even talk about this right now because I will fall apart, but it was extremely powerful moment to bring these people into the Met as the composers and the collaborators on this work that was widely covered and, you know, very public. So thank you for your question.
So we have time for one more. Is there?
Question.
Yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I just first of all wanted to say thank you for singing your name. That was one of the most extraordinary things I have ever seen. And it wasn't simply the singing. It was while you were singing, you changed. You became who you are. And that provoked such powerful thoughts in me about the difference between, I'm going to say, Western artists and what I am feeling from listening to both you and other indigenous artists here, that Western artist is about self-expression. For you, this is something so different and so much more powerful and so much richer. And just as this lady asking you about could she come and study with you, my question is, how can we, all of us, learn from you? How can we rid ourselves of those barriers inside our heads to really hear what you have? And how can you teach us? Please.
Well, we need space, we need recognition, we need time to heal our wounds, we need to tell our stories. We have been, for a long time, many, many hundreds of years, and this is all over the world concerning indigenous cultures, we have had to defend ourselves and our culture and our traditions in ways that have hurt us and might have made us a bit aggressive in some people's eyes. But we need to rebuild our society. We need to rebuild our confidence, our spiritual confidence. And when we have had time to do that, I think that we might be ready to share.
So we're sort of getting towards the end of this, so I want to ask a closing question and get a thought from you. Oftentimes in the arts, we think from the mindset of scarcity. But there is, in all of your work, each of you have leaned into something that you have in abundance. So I just would ask that you identify what you had in abundance that you were able to then utilize to support this idea of art being able to be a means for change. And then if there's anything else that you would like all of us to be thinking about or acting upon, because we can talk until the cows come home. I would want to know if you had to tell people, this is what you should try to do, or tell us what that is. Anyone? Plot, why don't we start with you? And
Okay.
mindful of time.
Thank you so much. I think for me, what I see as something that we have in abundance is the power of imagination. And I think as long as we are able to imagine, we're able to create, we're able to perform. I'm not a performer in any way, but I run initiatives that have touched and transformed lives, performing arts projects, simply out of the ability to imagine. But that imagination needs to continuously feed on something, traveling, exchanging, interacting, just discovering a new world, knowing the next person that is sitting next to you, understanding new cultures, understanding new things, and challenging stereotypes. I come from a very conservative society that does not tolerate certain norms and beliefs, but a lot of those have had to be challenged simply because of getting a chance to interact with other creatives and knowing that there is more out there, and that has broadened also my work. Lastly, I think we should not be limited by anything. Last year, we started a festival of contemporary dance in Zimbabwe at the peak of political turmoil, and when other festivals were closing shops. But we managed to kick off that festival simply because we saw an opportunity in the struggles that people had, that there was a new narrative, there was an interesting imagination, and
I love it.
Yes.
Imagination. Limor.
Okay, so abundance. I think that I'm especially blessed with an abundance of narratives. And what I challenge myself to do is to pay attention to the different kinds of narratives, not just the loudest narratives. And what I would encourage us all to do, and I know I encourage myself to do this, and it's not always easy, is to reject this phrase that we're all using of low-hanging fruit. Can we just make a pinky pact to just, whenever we have that thought, to walk away from it and to embrace instead the destabilizing ideas, the complexity, the discomfort. And it's within that destabilizing and discomfort zone that we're going to make space for each other and for voices that are not being heard and narratives that need to be uplifted.
Beautiful. Osa.
Well, I feel like now I'm just going to talk about the area that I come from, where I was growing up within the North Sámi people. We have an abundance of stories, and we have abundance of singing. And my mother, when she was alive, she was a dream interpreter, and she had these women and men coming to her to tell their dreams. We have a lot of knowledge in how to deal with everyday issues in our cultures. And I must say that we're talking very much nowadays about climate change. For indigenous people, this is not new. In my area that I came from, we started to see the change in nature for 30 years ago. I know that Sámi young people, together with other indigenous people, they have approached United Nations already for 15, 20 years ago, telling the message that now is in the media very much. And I say that we have something to tell, but if you don't hear us talking, then we can't do anything.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for your time. Thank you all